Hello and welcome to The Big Issue. This is your big Saturday current affairs show where we bring you the key highlights of the issues that trended throughout the week, bring you some angles you haven't experienced, and also some insights that will lead you into greater understanding. My name is Bernard Avle. I'm sitting in for a regular host, Godfrey Akotobuafo, and it's a big economic roundtable we're having today. This week has been very interesting because the former Finance Committee chairperson has said that the E-levy that government so much touts will not be enough to save Ghana's economy, and that we should eat humble pie and go back to the IMF. We'll be examining that from all the various angles with some very insightful panel members, some of whom have actually worked with the IMF to give us insights what an IMF program means. And while all that argument goes on, the fuel price in Ghana has broken the 7, probably threatening to break the 8. What is really going on there? We will ask whether there is something that readily can be done to cushion users, particularly in the public transport space of petroleum products. And if there's time, we'll look at the failed attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau and what all of that means for instability in the sub-region, Ghana's chairing of ECOWAS, and matters arising. It's a big conversation on the big issue today. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Issue. We're live on radio, 97.3 Citi FM. We're live on Citi Television. We're live on the internet, on our social media platforms. It's an interactive show. And today, hopefully, you get a deeper understanding into the issues bedeviling Ghana's economy, the options open to us, and what realistically can be done to save Ghana's economy from what many describe as a perilous state. In fact, before we came on air, 1.5 updates were issued in terms of where Ghana's economy is. So Moody's released an analysis of Ghana's economy with a rating. And we also had what is supposed to be an upgrade from Fitch. An update from Fitch, which further downgrades Ghana's already perilous position. We'll look at all of those during the show today. But I have a very interesting array of guests. In studio, I have one of our regulars, Franklin Kujo, who is the chief executive of one of the leading think tanks in Ghana, Imani. Franklin, good to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
It's usually I see you on the Zoom, but today you are here in the flesh.
Yes, it's good to appear in flesh sometimes.
Fantastic. We also have a member of parliament for Cape Coast South who used to be a deputy finance minister. So a few years ago, he would have been grappling with what these rating agencies say, whether we have enough money to pay workers. But now he's just in parliament resisting the E-levy. Kweku Rikitegan, good to have you.
Thank you.
So it appears being opposition is easier than being in government because all your white hair is gone. Your hair is black now.
Well, I don't know about that, but definitely being in government is tough. You know, you in opposition, you're supposed to provide a constructive criticism. But
I see. And that doesn't affect your hair. I also have two very astute economists. Dr. John Kwache is the director of research of one of Ghana's leading think tanks, the IEA. He's an economist by training, and I know some of his work was with the IMF. Dr. Kwache, great to have you. Thanks for joining The Big Issue. Good morning.
Good morning.
Fantastic. And I also have Professor Lord Mensah, who teaches at the University of Ghana Business School. He's an economist as well. Prof, great to have you. Good morning.
Morning, Brian, and good morning to our viewers.
Fantastic. So what I want to do first is to just read a quick excerpt of what Moody's is saying about our economy. Fitch did what they call a correction of their January 14 downgrade, which I really thought was just one word they changed. So I think it's still B negative or B minus with outlook negative for Fitch. And would even ask why these rating agencies hold so much sway over the market. But the key point they are making is that looking at where Ghana's finances are, we will not have access to the markets, the international bond market in particular, for the rest of this year and possibly next year. They do acknowledge that we have some domestic resources to help pay our obligations in the immediate to near future. But they also feel that some of our projections for economy are too optimistic and that Ghana may be in a difficult position. Now, I'll put on the screen, for those of you watching on television, the scale that Moody's uses. So quickly, there are three rating agencies: Standard & Poor's, Fitch Ratings, and Moody's. And the ratings are typically very similar. So AAA is like the platinum standard, and then D is the worst for all. But if you come to the specifics, the last rating of Fitch gave us a B-, and the outlook can either be stable or negative. And they said it was negative. Now, Moody's has also downgraded our rating to CAA1, which is a little below their B3. The B3 of Moody's is similar to the B- of Fitch. It's on the same line. Now, let me just read a few highlights of this, and I'll start with my guest on the Zoom as before. Moody's downgrades Ghana's credit rating to CAA1, outlook stable, and the story is from Paris. It says Moody's Investor Service has today downgraded the government of Ghana's long-term issuer and senior unsecured debt rating to CAA1 from B3 and changed the outlook to stable from negative. Moody's has also downgraded the senior unsecured MTM program rating to PCAA1 from B3 and the backed senior unsecured debt rating to B3 from B1. This downgrade reflects the increasingly difficult task the government faces addressing its intertwined liquidity and debt challenges. Weak revenue generation, constraints government budget flexibility, and tight funding conditions on international markets have forced the government to rely on costly debt with shorter maturity. Moody's estimates that interest payments will absorb more than half government's revenue over the foreseeable future, which is exceptionally high compared to peers at all rating levels. As a remedy, the government has proposed sharp fiscal consolidation and a switch to borrowing from external partners on more favorable terms. However, the strategy comes with sizable implementation risks, especially in a still fragile post-pandemic environment, and while international market creditors price is wide risk premium. And then it goes on to say other things. First and foremost, I'll start with Professor Dr. Kwache. Generally, even before we talk about what the rating agencies say, from where you sit as an economist at the IEA, what has been your assessment of Ghana's economy and where we are? What's your opening thought about the state of Ghana? Is it as precarious as it's been made to sound, or this is just a regular bad day we face with the cycles we experience in many years?
Thank you so much, man. Well, I must say that before COVID, I think government was trying to get the economy, at least the fiscal sector, fiscal policy, trying to tailor it towards sustainable, level. Because it is the government that had passed the fiscal responsibility law, and they were working towards achieving the ceiling of 5%, the fiscal deficit ceiling. And then COVID struck. And then because of the expenditures that were involved, and then also we must remember that government had also incurred a lot of expenditure in the energy sector, and then in bailing out the financial sector. So if you add all this together, this had compounded, government payments. And then, of course, that had fed into the deficit and also the public debt. Mm-hmm. And then going forward, as I said, COVID struck, and government has been struggling, to get out of the COVID situation. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we are still not collecting enough revenue, which has further been dampened by COVID. And then if you go to the expenditure side also, the allocation of the revenue that we collect is also not the best. Mm-hmm. Expenditure is plagued by a lot of rigidities. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, interest payment is already so high. Compensation is equally high. Then we have revenue earmarked for various statutory payments. So it's like government hands is already tied. Whatever revenue we collect, we allocate it to these sectors, and then we don't have enough even for capital expenditure. And then the debt has, as I said, has also, ballooned. So it is, these indicators that the credit rating agencies normally use, to grade you. They will look at your debt profile because they have evidence of your debt and the payments that are coming due. They also look at the fiscal deficit, profile, because that will give them an indication as to whether government will be able to meet its obligations, going forward. And then when they provide their rating, it gives a signal to investors also. So that will determine whether when you go to the market, you'll be able to borrow, at easier cost or very expensive cost. So that is where we stand now.
So thank you for that intro. Professor Lord, what is your assessment of Ghana's economy? We are in Q1 2022. When you and your team at the business school do the numbers, what is the state of the Ghanaian economy?
Well, good morning once again to our viewers and the panelists at the studio. Ben, you see, the Ghanaian economy is an economy that is struggling, but unfortunately, our economic managers don't put that when they are planning or they are budgeting for the economy. An economy that was able to rake in around 70 billion last year. Within a year, I don't know the measures we've put in place, and I don't know the revenue measures, i.e. the expenditure that we want to put up across. That will allow us to increase, our revenue by 30 billion, lifting the revenue target to around, 100.5 billion. Now, I look at the economic activities on the grounds, and I ask myself the 30 billion difference, how is it going to be, raised in the economy? And then looking at the international market, the swell up of our debt, the difficulty that we will face if we go to the international market. Somebody will say, Fitch, from the readings that you read to us from the Fitch or Moody's.
That was Moody's.
Moody's, they're giving the signal that we can't go to the international market.
Yes.
But I bet you we can go there.
Seriously?
We can go to the international market, but at a higher cost.
Okay.
In fact, historically, if you trace the transitions of our, ratings, we've never been in the CAA zone before. We've never been in the C zone before.
Yeah.
Which, if you can go, the history is there.
Yeah.
From Moody's, Fitch, and all those. We've never been in that very high, credit risk zone. Now, at that zone, you can borrow, but, you're borrowing at a very high cost. The reason why I'm saying you can borrow from the market is that, if you look at global funds moving across, the world, Africa, with Ghana is part of it. We've been categorized as frontier market. Now, the frontier market is where, pensions, institutions, and all those from the advanced world, use that to, diversify their portfolio to make very high returns. They know very well that in their environment, interest rate is reeling around, 2% and below. And I have a friend who works in Switzerland, more interested in, African bonds. And he gives me the signal that, look, African bonds are good bonds for us because they are bonds that if they put the money here, by the time we pay first, coupon, second coupon, third coupon, they are more or less covering their principal. So even though the risk is high, with the high interest rates that they are charging us, the speed of collecting their money and therefore holding up with the interest in the future is very, very high. So they're still interested in our bonds. But then you look at how we're managing this economy that is now putting up infrastructure. And then infrastructure, I mean IT infrastructure, which budgeted, last year made actual revenue of 70 billion. And then you jump to, 105, which you're looking at about 30 billion difference.
Okay.
Then you're asking yourself, where are we going to get this? And the same manner we increase our revenue, the same way we also increase our expenditure. This is an overly optimistic management without looking at, the possible exposures. Because you are saying that you can increase your revenue by about 40%, which is abnormal. For me, it doesn't make sense. And so I don't know the aggressive, what our economic managers see, in this economy, that we do those projections. The projections sometimes, can raise hopes unnecessarily. You can have, this revenue, possibly coming in. Then you want to also go with an expenditure matchup. So you look at our expenditure and you realize that has also been increased by about 35 billion and over.
Okay.
Creating a huge deficit, right? A huge deficit. And as to how to finance this deficit of about 37 billion is where the government is struggling to fill in now.
All right. Since you will be leaving us much earlier, I want to sort of run through my questions for you quickly because my other panelists will be here throughout the show. So you're basically saying that even though some of the rating agencies are saying that we may not be able to access the international markets, you're saying we can, but at a higher cost. Number
Very
two,
high.
You're saying the assumptions and the projections that our economic managers make are too optimistic, and the size of the deficit reflects that miscalculation. So far, so
Sure.
good. So my question to you, we heard clearly from Asebe Yeboah last week that even if we raise 6 billion from the E-levy, it will not be enough to plug our deficit, and therefore we should go to the IMF. So he essentially pitches E-levy against IMF as the two alternatives. What's your comment on that? Is that the right equivalency, or is it a false choice?
Well, for me, the analysis, if you look at it carefully, now let's break down, the expenditure side of our budget, and then look at the portion of the expenditure that E-levy is coming to fill in if there should be a deficit. Now, if you take out the E-levy, I don't think this economy is going to struggle so much. Now, if you look at the IMF as an alternative, then I ask myself, okay, then we may be better off giving the economy to IMF to manage it for us. That is what I would say. Because not long ago, we came from IMF, and we know the economic consequence for going to IMF. You will not have your freedom for that peanut that they're going to give you. So effectively, I would say that it wasn't something that needs to be compared. However, if we are not getting the E-levy as expected, we should look at, our expenditure side of the budget. Because if you don't, raise the money, you can't spend it. And I always break the budget down, clearly, and how we jumped some of the items on the expenditure side of the budget. If you look at, for instance, other, which is an item on the expenditure side, this is a typical non-earmark, fund. Last year, we made around 7 billion. This year, we're looking at 10 billion, an increase of about 3 billion. Now, there's also an item in there which talks about grants to government agencies. That grant to government agencies last year was around, Bernard, was around 15 billion. This year, we're targeting around 26 billion, which is about 11 billion increase. All these things are, expenditures that I call it discretionary, expenditure. expenditure that you have control over as a country, an economic manager. Why don't you look at this side of the, that kind of expenditure that you control? You see, I've not mentioned, salaries. I've not mentioned interest payment and all those. Because those ones, your hands are tied. You must pay it. And if you are increasing your worker's salary by 7% across board, you know the increase in the in the possible expenditure that you may rake in. And then the interest payment, you know the amount of money you're supposed to pay in the coming year. So for those ones, estimating it is quite easier, right? So I call it non-discretionary expenditure because you cannot control it as expected. But the ones that the government can control, my question is, why do we increase, from 15 billion to 26 billion as an expenditure projection for this year? If you look at it carefully, you will realize that that's about more than 40-something% increase. And you ask yourself, why, this increase? What economic activity or what structures is this SOEs going to put in place to jump, their expenditure from 15 billion to 26 billion within a year? So that is where I have problem. And so I think we may not necessarily have to look at IMF, because if you look at IMF, if you want IMF to come and instill financial discipline in you before you can manage the economy, then you are better off giving the economy to IMF, surrender the economy to IMF and say that IMF, I cannot manage my economy. These are my inflows. These are my outflows. Okay. Manage the economy for me. All right, because not long ago we came from IMF.
Thank you. So your assumption is that IMF doesn't give you enough money. What they do is essentially help you go through an austerity program, and you're analyzing the budget and saying you can already find places where government can make some cuts. You
can squeeze yourself.
So
yes,
the money they give you think is not enough to merit the program, and that we can have a homegrown austerity program without them. I'll pause it there. Let me come to my studio guest, and I'll go back to Professor Kwachi later because I know he has worked closely with them in the past. Let me start with the MP for Cape Coast South. You're a former deputy minister, and even though we haven't received this type of rating before, I'm sure we've been here before, where I don't know whether it's 2013 or so, they were saying, let's have a homegrown solution, let's go to Senchi, let's talk about the economy. So for somebody who just looks at the economy, this isn't such a strange situation, right, where we are now, or is it?
Thank you very much, Ben, and I want to say good morning to my fellow panelists and people watching us this morning. Well, the economy of Ghana over the years been like a roller coaster. But the situation that we are in now, it's like the whole ride that you are on is now at the bottom. So usually it goes like that.
So you're in the trough of the roller coaster.
Absolutely. Taking you down. And we look like we're stuck there. Why am I saying that? Because, as you rightly said, some of the ratings we've seen, we've never been there. It's a new territory for us. We've never actually received, what Moody's came up with,
CAA1,
which, if you look on the others, would be like CCC plus and all that. Though, but they
so a CAA1 for Moody's is a CCC plus for Fitch and a CCC plus for Standard & Poor's.
Though we had a better ratings from Fitch the last time.
Yes.
Therefore, when they downgraded, we didn't get to see.
Well, we got
to B minus. But really, where we are is in the junk, basically status, which. If you look at the three.
No, they call it speculative grade. Well, very speculative.
It's junk, basically.
Is it? I thought D was junk.
No. You have to. There are categories. When you say junk, you have speculative, which is non-grade. They're all junk. I mean,
is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's when you come to the B's, that's where you have the investment grade. you know, from A's to the 3Bs.
Yes. Investment grade, yes.
Yeah, but anything below that is actually a junk in different categories.
Is it?
So you have the non-grade, which looks better, you know, probably your B, double B, you know, pluses and minus. And then you go on to another level, which is like, if you leave your speculative, you go to highly speculative.
I see.
You know, and then you go to basically a substantial risk.
Yes.
You know, and then you go further down to. So D is not necessarily the worst one. There are other, you know, ones. We've never been there before. And why are we here? We are here because of bad policies by government. We are here because of over-promising and over-activities since this government, you know, came to office. And all the things that they have pumped money in, nobody has really sat down to look at the performance of these things that they've spent a lot of money on. So there are no really any performance appraisal or in the things that they have done. And they keep pouring money and keep pouring money. Don't forget, any year you get a deficit, it's your deficit that basically becomes your debt. Because the accumulation of your deficit in the long run gives you a debt. So if you are running deficit every year, then basically what you are doing is that you are accumulating or you are making your debt, you know, bigger. Now, before pandemic, and you know, everything else is being blamed on the pandemic. And now the pandemic is the opposite of the E-levy. Every problem was caused by the pandemic, and every solution will be solved by the E-levy. This is what you get from this government. But in between, there are so many things that happen that need to be looked at. Why are we borrowing so much, and what have we actually used the money for? We have said that before when we were in office. Borrowing is not a bad thing. It depends on what you are borrowing the money for. They said, oh, you don't need to borrow that much. You find the money here and all that. When they came, they basically went on to a borrowing spree. But the problem with them, and with the NDC, not because I'm with the NDC government, is that you can have things that you can show for and say this is what the money was borrowed for. If you want to talk about, you know, value for money, that's a different discussion. But when you look at this government, you cannot even see the things to know whether you got a good value for money or not. Now we've gone to the I don't know whether it's good or bad, but we got to a position as an economy where we qualify to basically go to the market. You know, before we were taking loans from the IMF, the World Bank, concessionary loans, and then our status as an economy improved, which opened us to the capital market. Probably that's one of the worst things that happened to us. That happened to us. And then you got a finance minister.
I'm sure you disagree.
Oh, I agree.
Okay. You got a finance minister who actually thinks more of this international capital market. So the two of them coming together, opening ourselves to the international market and getting a finance minister who is actually, you know, comfortable in this market.
But the roadshows were started by your former boss, Tepe, who himself used to work for the IMF, who was quite fond of the capital markets as well.
Well, we got fond of the capital market.
Because the first one under MPP was Banredu. After that, we went...
Yeah, that was the 2007 one.
Yes, then from there...
We didn't do any until, I think, 2014.
Yes, so Mr. Tekpe is the one who actually led us properly.
Yeah, but we did about 3 or 4 or so of the Eurobond.
Yes.
This government has done about 8 or so, you know, in a short space of time. So if you put out the number of Eurobonds that this government has done and the amount of money that has come in, it's quite astronomical. But you cannot tell what the money has actually been used for. Now, we just found out from the World Bank that actually people thought that the money we got from the World Bank was about 100 million. It's in excess of 600 million, which was given to us. If you put all the COVID money together, the money coming from the European Union was about 80-something, million euros. You look at what they got from the stabilization fund, near almost 300. you look at all the IMF, the 1 billion and the 1 billion later, and ask yourself, what did they use this money for? Because not a single hospital was constructed. When you ask them, they say, we build wards in the hospital. Not a single school. When you ask them, they say, we build classrooms. I mean, you cannot equate building classrooms and building wards to the amount of money that these guys got.
I know some of the money goes into paying pre-acquired debt. So like when the interest were due for some of the Eurobonds that were procured during your tenure, quite a substantial amount of the money is used to pay those. So it's more like a profiling of debts.
Yeah, but you can say
you do know that.
What we need is actually a proper audit
of the monies that have been received.
Monies that came in for COVID, because what we are paying for, or what they are telling us we are paying for, is as a result of COVID. Okay? But you did get support for the COVID. So what did you use the COVID money for? All these monies that we begin to hear. What did you use it for us to get to this point? When you become trigger happy in the market and borrowing. Look, as Prof said, that they can go to the market to borrow. Yes, of course they can, but they won't. Because the consequences of going to the market is not something that anyone can stomach. So that is what stops them from going to the market. Not that they can't go, but they will dare not go to the market because the amount of money they are going to pay to be able to get the money that they are looking for will not be worth it. So now they are going to come to the domestic market, and that's the only option that they have. And that itself is going to create problems. The gradings the downgrading that they are getting is as a result of a limited option to this government in getting out of the hole that they have dug for themselves. They have a lot of programs. Look, you look at, I always cite this, and it's quite interesting one. Planting for food and job sounds fantastic. You are planting for food, planting for job. When you look at the contribution of agriculture to GDP, or maybe even agriculture itself is wider because we've got fisheries and other things. Let's stick to crops, which is what is supposed to be growing for food. The more they grow, the less they harvest, if you look in the budget. Because the contribution of crops in terms of GDP to it's always going down. So something is happening there. They are pouring money probably at a good project, but the project is not being...
We'll get into the details of that.
Not being done.
So for your introductory thoughts, if I understand you, you're basically saying that this is self-inflicted based on poor policy choices.
Absolutely.
You don't think it's a structural issue that if you look at our economy for the past 30 years, it's troughs and elevations, which is almost like it repeats itself every 4 or 5 years, irrespective of government.
Yeah.
There are some people who think that these are structural issues.
Absolutely, we have structural issues. We have issues with even our revenue generation. These are all structural issues. We have some element of the problems we're having now due to the pandemic, but the bulk of it is the mismanagement of the economy by the present managers of the economy.
Those will be introductory thoughts. Let me bring Franklin Kujo in for his opening thoughts as well. This is the big issue. Franklin, you've been sitting quietly. Where do you sit? How did we get here as an economy?
Well, this was obviously coming. Once we were promised by this government that we were going to move away from taxation to production, it was somehow supposed to be answering one of the critical structural questions that we have, which is weak productivity in the private sector. Of course, in addition to high cost of borrowing. And so we were all agog with, if not laughter, that this was going to be a very, basically nirvana, where we're going to at least reach a destination where we'll start addressing the fundamental issues with the structure of the economy. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and I think that has not happened simply because of excessive waste, government waste. In fact, that's the third leg of the sorry state of our economy. And when I say weak management, essentially, is the profligacy, really. I mean, if you take a look at the first term of this government, most of the programs that were subsumed under the Office of the President, Office of Government Machinery, the Ministry for Special Development Initiative, I keep saying that ministry single-handedly started the process of our unraveling of our economic state right now. Because most of the investments they made were not profitable investment, they were not viable investment. The Ministry of Special Development Initiative, which has
was in the first time.
Exactly, which has been collapsed. I think it's been collapsed right now. A significant amount of money was given to that ministry, and we all know, we saw most of the stories. The 1 million per constituency, we barely saw any value for money, any audit that showed that these monies were extended and expended in the way they were supposed to have been. The one village, one dam essentially were dug out. The value was ballooned sometimes by 7 times. So,
have you audited the Special Development Initiatives Ministry's work, or has there been any audits of them specifically?
Well, there's been some, if you like, side audits. It's very difficult to come by figures, but essentially also because they never really publish anything significant. I mean, they've been quite evasive. When you ask them for the cost of a dam, at the point we found out that a dugout was constructed for nearly 50,000 cities, but then allocations were made to almost 300,000 cities. So from a peripheral even analysis, you tend to realize that this was not value for money, the expenditure. But I guess the question really we're asking ourselves is, why are we scared of the IMF? Really? Because Professor Bokpin, who happens to be a fellow of Imani, has actually documented that we've been to the IMF 16 times.
Since independence?
Since independence. Since we joined in 1957. And we have been the 5th most enthusiastic, should I say, enthusiastic
disciple
of the IMF.
Or member
of the IMF on the African continent.
Really?
And he predicted at the last forum we held somewhere in 2019 that we were going to go to the IMF pretty soon. And I'm sure, apart from the issues around ego, clearly speaking, it's also the timing of the time we go to the IMF. We go to the IMF typically when basically all hope seems to be lost. Meanwhile, as I understand, the IMF has a number of facilities that we can access even before we get to the critical or the crucial stage of an extended credit facility or an enhanced credit facility or enhanced fund facility. Those stages are like life support.
Okay.
Which was what I suspected, not that I suspected, sorry, which was what the NDC government did in 2015. We had waited, the signs were there. We needed to do a homegrown policy, Senchi. I was part of Senchi.
Oh, you were there, I know.
Yeah, I remember. And it was late in coming that eventually went to the IMF. I think the other fear, which has been highlighted about going to the IMF, is that if you go to the IMF, then you shortchange yourself. The market signals that you are weak. I don't think it's actually the case. I think in 2015, in April 2015, when the NDC government went to the IMF, in October 2015, they did their Eurobond, even though it was priced at a higher interest rate. Kenya, which went to the IMF, I think in 2021 for a $1 billion facility. Just 2 months after that, secured almost $2.3 billion from the market at almost 6.3% interest rate. Compared to Ghana, that did a Eurobond in 2021 for a 7-year Eurobond at $1 billion, and we are paying almost 8% interest rate for it. So it tells you clearly that there's no truth in the assertion that once you go to the fund, your options for going to the market are extinguished. In actual fact, it actually enhances your ability to
really.
It does.
So you are saying, number one, don't be afraid of IMF.
Yeah.
Number two, going to IMF actually may help how the market perceives you.
Of course. I mean, clearly speaking, I mean, in the words of the former, was it the finance minister, Setepe, that we're going for policy, not Mahama, policy credibility.
Policy credibility.
Which is actually true, because once you are credible, when the fund comes in, it means that you are going to rein in some of your borrowing and then your expenditure. You see, the current government decided to be smart when this E-levy conversations was going on. At the point they said, look, we are going to reduce expenditure by 20%. Well, what they actually meant was that until they have the money, they wouldn't spend. So if they had the money, they'll spend anyway. But at least it was enough signaling to the market that, look, we would definitely reduce our, should I call it, appetite for spending out of our pockets. But clearly, the IMF at this stage, if we are going to we are going into an IMF program, it will be because we are going for the last of the. We are the last stage where we basically need some sort of support. And that definitely will bring in the conditionality of cutting excessive borrowing and reducing your expenditure.
Let me read the statement the IMF country rep, or is it the resident rep? Is that what they call them?
Yes.
Dr. Tuna Mama tweeted this, and then we will see whether that gives us a hint of anything. When I'm done with that, I'll pick some other thoughts on this quickly. So economic activity continues to bounce back from the 2020 pandemic shock. Real GDP growth likely exceeded 4% in 2021, and it is projected to reach 6% in 2022, driven by a rebound in the extractive sectors. In the longer run, we see potential in agri, manufacturing, and services to create jobs for the youth. Right now, Ghana's challenges stem from the fiscal and debt situation and less from the economic recovery. This is key. Right now, Ghana's challenges stem from the fiscal and debt situation. I think Kwachi said this, and less from the economic recovery. As highlighted during the July 2021 Article 4 consultation, a deeper and more equitable fiscal effort is needed to address fiscal and debt vulnerabilities. The proposed 2022 budget and the recently announced 20% spending cut go into that direction. Throughout the COVID pandemic, the IMF has maintained a close policy and technical assistance dialogue with the authorities. The Ghanaian authorities have not, and the not is in capital NOT, requested for a program with the IMF. As always, the IMF stands ready to support Ghana in any way deemed useful by the authorities. This is a very interesting statement. It was not signed. It was tweeted by the REST rep. It didn't even say hello, good morning. It just entered straight into the economic analysis. When we come back, we'll discuss this.
Sure. And
I'll start with Dr. Kwachi and also Prof. This is the big issue, Saturday edition. I'm sitting in for Godfrey. We are trying to do an economic roundtable on Ghana's economy. We've taken opening remarks from everybody else. Franklin is saying that we shouldn't be afraid of the IMF. They are not Kaka Mutobi. In fact, he thinks when you go to give more credibility. Dr. Kwachi actually worked with them at some point in his career. What does he make of the brouhaha over this going to IMF issue? And what else do we need to get Ghana's economy back on track? We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is The Big Issue. We're live on Citi TV and on Citi FM. My name is Bernard Avle. And today we're doing what I call an economic roundtable on Ghana's economy. I have a rich panel. In studio, I have Kweku Riketegan, MP for Cape Coast South. He's also a former Deputy Minister of Finance and Deputy Minister of other portfolios. Franklin Kujo, Executive Director of Imani. I have on Zoom as well Dr. John Kwachi. He is the head of research at IEA. He's an economist. And I also have Professor Lord Mensah, University of Ghana Business School. Dr. Kwachi, I'm coming back to you. I'm not sure if you actually worked with the IMF, but I know you have some affiliation with them in your past work. And so then that gives you some insight into how they operate. What do you make of this clamor for Ghana to go back into an IMF program? Are those calls justified or misplaced?
Yeah, Ben, I have worked with the IMF. In fact, I worked with the IMF for 10 years.
Wow.
I wasn't a member of staff. I was working as Ghana's representative at the IMF. In other words, in the executive director's office.
Okay.
But even before I joined the IMF, I worked at the Bank of Ghana for a very long time. And then we had close working relationship with the IMF. In fact, my own thesis was on IMF stabilization programs in developing countries, Ghana as a case study.
Okay.
So I'm very familiar with the way the IMF operates. And so I must say that, the statement put out by the IMF rep, he has summed up our position, pretty well. In other words, he's suggesting that, our real sector of the economy is not doing too badly. In fact, even in 2020, when we recorded just 0.9% growth or something like that, other countries, most countries recorded even negative growth. And for 2021, we don't have the actual figures yet, but we could have done about 4%. And this is expected to increase further. So on the real side, we haven't done badly at all. But it looks like the markets are focusing more on government finances. That is where I think the problem is. But even if you look at government finances, the budget that the minister presented for 2022, the medium-term profile, takes the deficit from 7.4% in 2022 and progressively down to 4% by 2025, when they would have come back into the fiscal responsibility ceiling. So the medium-term profile is not that bad. But I think the market is also focusing largely on 2022 itself. And you will see that the forecast there, the projections there are quite huge. In other words, the jump from 2021 to 2022, when, in fact, revenue as a ratio of GDP, for instance, is being projected to rise from 16% to 20%. This is a very huge jump. It is traditionally, historically, we don't do that. And the E-levy and other measures that government says is going to take to plug some of the tax loopholes, are all in there. But it looks like the market is doubting whether government, has the capacity to achieve these targets, especially when they are struggling, to get the E-levy approved in Parliament. But talking about IMF specifically, every member of the fund can go to maybe some financial, assistance as well. Every member is entitled to policy advice under Article 4 consultation, but that is not binding, and it's not supported by funding also. But if you want some financial assistance from them together with policy advice, then of course you have to come under some conditionalities that they impose on you. The main advantage in going to the IMF, I believe, apart from the money, if you need the money, but the money is not normally too much, it's not a lot. In fact, our last program, we received just under $1 billion from the IMF over a 3-year period. That is not, huge. But what you gain by going to the IMF is rather the policy credibility. You see, investors, don't have a hope in you now. So you go to the IMF, and then the IMF, because they are giving you policy advice, investors will take it like, oh, you are going to conform, you are going to be disciplined, because on your own, you are not following, fiscal discipline. So it gives you that kind of policy credibility. It may also catalyze some funding from other. Well, these days we don't even receive enough of bilateral or concessional funding. So, but it may also help you when you go to the bond market, because of. So that is the advantage in going to the IMF. Looking at government finances specifically, I still believe that there's room for government to scale up, revenue mobilization, because there are a lot more loopholes that they need to plug. The exemptions, illicit financial flows, non-compliance, property taxes that we don't collect, the informal sector that we don't reach out to sufficiently, administrative lapses and so on. if you try to plug all these loopholes, I'm sure that, you'll be able to scale up revenue substantially, and even the E-levy may not be needed. The E-levy is supposed to rake in just about $1.1 billion. That is not a lot. If you plug these loopholes, you get a lot more, from there. Some people have also suggested that maybe this is the time that government should impose some kind of windfall tax on the sectors that have done so well in the recent past, and then also under the Zoom. This will be one of, the super profit tax. It's not going to be permanent. Other countries are doing it. And we're talking about, the gold companies, the oil companies, and even the telcos. The telcos themselves, they have done very well in the, under the COVID. So my view about going to the IMF is that I believe that the government itself must examine itself, because I don't think they are doing enough. Now, if they feel like they are not going to be able to take the very harsh measures, especially, on revenue side, and then on the if you go to the expenditure side also, there's room for curtailment of, especially we are spending a lot on these, government flagship the program, flagship programs. There's a lot of money being spent on free senior high school, free nursing and trainee and teacher training
allowance,
allowances, now allowances and all that. This is taking a lot of government expenditure. So if we could streamline or rationalize government expenditure and then also scale up revenue, I don't think that there will be any need. Then the market will believe in us. They will have confidence in us. And that will improve our credit ratings. And you may not then have to go to the IMF.
Okay, I'll come back to you on the IMF, but let me come to Prof quickly on policy credibility matters. Prof, your view is that the amount of money we get from IMF is not enough to merit the hassle. Some people even think that if you've been to the IMF 16 times and your economy is still in this state, the IMF itself has credibility questions to answer. Because if you've helped somebody 16 years in its independence, 16 times, and they are still in this crazy state, maybe your advice isn't that good in the first place. I mean, what are your thoughts on that and the issue of policy credibility?
Well, you see, Bernard, I have always, been reserved when it comes to IMF. You see, IMF, is a fund which Ghana forms part of. And for me, I see it to be, it's more or less an insurance. Okay. And so, like you said, being in IMF for 16 times, I see the signal to be like more or less, taking an insurance for your car and then decided to drive your car to hit someone's car so that you can get the insurance. And that is, more or less similar to the Ghana situation, where we know very well that, there's an IMF which will come to our rescue for us to, have that kind of temporal credibility, possibly to assess the international market. But we were here when IMF came, they gave us, some guidelines. Even there was an act, if I remember very well, the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Bernard, do you remember that Fiscal Responsibility Act?
Yes.
Which also helps us to, have what we call Fiscal Responsibility Committee, having a lot of economists on board. And all these things were put in place to ensure that even in the absence of IMF, we can still function, to manage our, finances very well. Now, we were so happy, to get IMF off our necks. I remember very well, it was a form of campaign where, a party member would say, we'll take you out of IMF. When we go out of IMF, we'll be fine. Now, we were running budget deficit of almost 5% when we were with IMF. But then immediately we escaped IMF. The next year, our budget deficit jumped to 11%. Then I asked myself, what was the function of the Fiscal Responsibility Committee and the Act that was supposed to ensure that we stay disciplined, we stay in line with the ideal situation that IMF expected.
No, but I thought they said it was because of COVID or something. They shelved that because of COVID, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I don't believe in that. If you look at the things that are coming out, I mean, even the last 2 days, the information that was coming from the World Bank, country representative, the IMF country representative, the World Bank country representative. Yes. So clearly, I don't believe in that. So, I mean, IMF came in, put in measures, to ensure that even if you go off the program, you will still maintain that financial discipline. But we go off board. We went off board, immediately we exited IMF. It was like, we're so happy with it. But you see, let me come back to the statement that, the IMF country representative indicated on Twitter, which is giving us some hope in agriculture. Bernard, I will tell you that there's no hope in agriculture.
Oh.
If there's hope in agriculture, with the policies that were being rolled out, planting for food and jobs in the first term of this government, what is the price of food on the market? Every now and then, prices of food keeps on increasing. What's the price of rice? What is the price of tomatoes? All these things are, policy-oriented products that, as an individual, when I go to the market, I'm supposed to feel it. Let me tell you one thing. If that policy was to work very well, I don't think we'll still be having problems with the dollar. Why are we having issue with the what do you call it, exchange rate, with the dollar going up every now and then? Because we are importing more. We're importing food. And the inflation that we try to control in this country, Bernard, they are imported inflation. They're not inflation that, is within the country. So for me, those policies are not yielding. For the past 4 years, I'm expecting that this time, because when you grow tomatoes, how long does it take to grow? I mean, if you're keeping chicken, how long does it, take to get a chicken from, the pen to the market? It doesn't take a year. So I was expecting that this time all these policies are yielding, so that at least 40% of our import, portfolio will be coming from in-house. In a way, it would have gone a long way to tame, the rate at which the dollar is moving. So I don't see that hope. As he mentioned.
So like you are saying that you don't think we should go to the IMF. You don't think we should go on any program.
So. We went to IMF. IMF came to put in measures, and those measures are to ensure that even if you win off, the program, you still stay disciplined. What's the essence of the Fiscal Responsibility Act? What's the sense of the committee made up of? I don't know whether they meet or not. So for me, I think we don't need to go.
We don't need to go. Okay, I'll take that as my main headline from you, because I know you have to go. So your point is, we don't need to go to the IMF. The money they give us is not anything to write home about. We can do the austerity ourselves. You don't think the policy credibility argument is anything to go by. And you don't even agree with the statement the man issued, because his optimism about the agriculture sector you think is misplaced. Am I quoting you rightly? You are.
Fantastic. You are. But then also, we're not going to IMF. We just have to stay disciplined. Use the structures that when IMF came in, they came to place.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Let me come back to the studio. I'm going to read the IMF statement again. I want your take on it. Frankly, it's a very interesting statement. 3 paragraphs. There was no heading. It was just text type on a sheet of paper being tweeted, but it's from his official account. So I take that as a statement. Yeah. Right. Economic activity. So as I said, there was no introduction, there was no good morning, there was nothing. He didn't say, I've been following the Ghanaian economic discussion and I want to make a statement. I did nothing. Straight away. Economic activity continues to bounce back from the 2020 pandemic shock. Real GDP growth likely exceeded 4% in 2021 and is projected to reach 6% in 2022, driven by a rebound in extractive sectors. In the longer run, we see potential in agri, manufacturing, and services to create jobs for the youth. End of paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. Right now, Ghana's challenges stem from the fiscal and debt situation and less from the economic recovery. As highlighted during the July 2021 Article 4 consultation, a deeper and more equitable fiscal effort is needed to address fiscal and debt vulnerabilities. The proposed 2022 budget and recently announced 20% spending cut go into that direction. So it's like an endorsement. at the end. Okay. 3. Then last paragraph. Throughout the COVID pandemic, the IMF has maintained a close policy and technical assistance dialogue with the authorities. Right? The Ghanaian authorities have not requested for a program with the IMF. As always, the IMF stands ready to support Ghana in any way deemed useful by the authorities. And he tweeted this, and when was this? February 3 at 9:07 a.m. And he tweeted at, funny enough, George Weafe, myself, and somebody called PM Oforiatta. Those were the 3 people who were tweeted at. So I got this statement and we issued it on our website. You've worked in this. What is going on here?
Well, the man is basically telling us that he wants to help us. Yeah, basically when you at the bottom.
He's courting us.
Yeah, yes. That look, we will have no choice at this stage than to go to the IMF. First of all, a point I was making earlier on, which Prof also did when I talked about agriculture, that the more we plant, the less we harvest. And we are putting a lot of money in there, yet we are not seeing the result. As I said, the GDP contribution of crops or agriculture is going down. So something is wrong there. So in as much as it looks like a good policy, something is not going right, and a lot of money is being pumped. And there are so many others, Franklin as well said, that these flagship programs need to be looked at. A lot of our money has gone there, even free education, to see whether we are actually spending the money where the money should go, because the result we are getting will not grow this economy. Look, you can talk about the economic outlook being good, but if your fiscal consolidation is not good, it cannot drive the growth that you are looking for. So basically, you may have a good outlook. As even Doc said, your medium-term picture may look good. But look, you've got to get there. You can't just... And the rating agencies are clearly telling us that they don't believe the story we are telling them. All the rosy, picture we are painting is not going to happen if we don't get hold of certain things that needs to be right. And that is our debt or our deficit, which feeds into our debt. Because the deficit comes as a result of needing money to fund these flagship programs, and then it becomes debt where we need to go and borrow money to do these things. Now, when the revenue issue that Prof talked about, I disagree with him a bit. You see, the issue
Pause you on. So, viewers, that's the tweet. Albertuna Mama, complete statement on #Ghana economy and going to IMF or not. Weafe, Benkoku, and PM Oforiatta. First paragraph is what I read. If you put second paragraph, so it's very, very strange statement. No letterhead, nothing. So it's basically he could have actually tweeted this himself, but it's just put on a piece of paper. So of course we are in a modern era of communication. So this is the view of the IMF in Ghana on our economy. Quite interesting.
Yeah, it also tells me straight away that this guy is desperate to help us.
You think so?
Oh, yes, they are desperate.
That's the interpretation you put on the statement.
He didn't even bother to say good morning or look. He probably woke up on bed and was worried about Ghana's economy. He lives here.
So no good morning, nothing.
No, so these guys need help. Let me just reach out to them and then see if they will come. Then I can talk to my people in Washington and see what we can do for them.
Okay.
But the revenue side of things, the issue is not about us targeting or bringing revenue targets that we cannot meet. The issue is about not doing enough to meet those targets and looking for the revenue in the wrong places. If you want to reach the informal sector, indirect tax is generally looked as a tax that you can reach, whichever part or wherever part of the economy that you want to reach. But it is not exactly true, because if you are also not careful, you can use the same indirect tax to hurt people who are already paying their taxes. Because if a tax is to be paid by everyone, and you say, the reason why I'm bringing the tax is because there are people in the economy, in the informal sector, who are paying no taxes. Therefore, let me bring a tax that reaches everyone. It reaches those who are also paying their taxes. So the tax burden on the people who are paying their taxes, being good citizens, also get affected by those who are not. So you've got to look at, so that's why for me, the E-levy, one of the reasons why it's not a good indirect, if you want to make it an indirect tax, is that it also hurts people who are already
What if the E-levy, as we are being rumored, is used as some sort of collateral for more money? Because the calculation of the E-levy money is not that much. Even if optimistically, Bryce Simmons has done the analysis, it's not that much. What if the agenda is to, and I'm not saying this is true, what if the agenda is say, there's a revenue flow coming in, we'll collateralize that and get more money? Putting away your NDC hat, will that be a sensible way of bringing in more resources?
You know, it wouldn't be.
Still?
I see that as a government being lazy, doesn't want to actually do the work, but wants to pick the fruits.
Okay.
You know, because they want to get the money up front to spend. They don't really care what will happen, you know, tomorrow. But if we can get the money, so you may be right. Because when I sit down and think about it, why do these people need this E-levy so much so that they are prepared to do everything for this E-levy? And when you look at it, the E-levy is only about 7% of the revenue they are looking for. The 100 billion they are looking for, it's just about 7% of it. So why would you leave, you know, about 92% and be chasing the 7%? I mean, maybe biblically you can look at, you know, the guy who had the sheep and one got missing has to go look for it. But what they are doing this time around is that they are not only going to look for the one sheep that is missing, but they've opened the door for the rest that have come in. And then by the time they get the one back, all the others will also be gone. So the issue is not with the target that we set for ourselves. The issue is not doing enough to widen the tax net, especially in the informal sector, to be able to get, you know, the revenue in. So I don't have a problem with whether they project that. Look, we say our peers are around 20% and we are around 16%. That tells you that there's a problem. So by projecting that your revenue is going to be 20% of your GDP, it's not being overly optimistic. But you are saying that this is where I should be. Now the question becomes, how do you get there? And that, I think, is what we are struggling. We're not doing the right things to get there. What is in this 20% that we want to get this time around is to do with problematic things like the E-levy and benchmark value. Okay. These are all part of what we're looking at. Now, when you are saying you are doing the fiscal consolidation, it's not only on the revenue side, but you have to also look at expenditure. There are a number of things that we have in our expenditure. That itself is problematic. I think Prof pointed out to a few of them. I really believe, from where I've been, and I really believe, I cannot tell you on authority, but I really believe that about 20% of our expenditure actually goes to waste.
Really?
Yes. So when the finance
20%?
Yes.
Of our expenditure goes to waste.
Wasteful, reckless, corruption, leakages takes about 20%. Now,
because if you reduce that, assuming what you are saying is true, then your deficit position becomes quite nice, because you're about 37 billion in deficit. If 20% of your expenditure is wasted, and even reduce that by half.
Yes. I just did a simple calculation. You take out, you know, there are statutory things that you probably at this stage can't do anything about. Maybe those things need to be also, we need to review them because of the rigidity of our budget. Itself is a structural problem.
Yeah.
Okay. So you take interest payment. You take compensation. In interest payment, we've got to look at why we are paying so much interest, and something needs to be done. Okay. When you take wages, you also got to look at whether all the people we are paying are actually working. Okay, you take earmarked, you know, common fund and all those things, get fund and all that, and look at what, you know, but this can be done later. But when you strip this off, in 2022 budget, if you take interest payment, which is about 37 billion, If you take wages, compensation, which is about 35 billion, you take earmark figures, you take amortization, which is almost about 2 billion, you take arrears out of the budget, because these are things that, the obligations that you must meet. Whatever is left, if you take 20% of whatever is left, that gives you about 7 billion. That is your E-levy. So if you can cut that, so the finance minister saying that 20% of expenditure, you can't cut across the whole expenditure 20%. You can't cut wages, you can't cut interest payment, you can't cut EMI figure. But when you take those out, whatever, if you take 20% of that, that will give you 7 billion. And that 7 billion will equate to your E-levy that you are looking for.
Fantastic. We'll read some comments. Before that, Franklin, just your comment on the statement I put on the screen, whether it's a regular way we communicate or it's a new way communication is done, whether your reading into the statement is similar to his. He is saying the man says, come, I want you to be on a program. He's basically saying the man is courting us. I don't know whether that's what you're saying. And then Lord Mensah says, we don't need them. You disagree.
Well, I suspect the difference here is that the head of the IMF in Ghana is has just communicated exactly what the fund does. Otherwise, the 4 major rules of the fund, apart from monitoring the global financial systems, monitoring countries' financial and economic systems as well, they also extend funds to countries that are struggling. Not necessarily struggling, sorry, and then finally they provide technical assistance. He says categorically that they've been engaging the government since 2019. If you recall the SDR, the special dry rights of almost $1 billion. So in that light, and he also mentioned the Article 4 consultations, which are all functions of the IMF, essentially saying that in that light, if the governments were ready, they were ready, and that the government has not communicated yet its readiness to assess a fund program. Then again, I like to say something about the fund program. It depends on the type of program you're actually going for. And my colleague Bryce Simmons has done some research in that regard. There are various types of programs that you could go for. I mean, he's asked the question, for instance, why is the government not going for a rapid finance instrument, which in 2020, Senegal, the likes of Namibia, and some other countries went in for. In fact, South Africa managed a $4.3 billion RFI program from the fund. And these funds typically come at virtually no low interest, should I call it, rate. If you compare them with the bond market, where we are currently borrowing almost at 8%, right? It even goes further to suggest that if we said the economy is that rosy, why don't we behave like the big boys who go for $50 billion, $24 billion on the IMF? So it is not necessarily the I think it's more or less the political tag that you've gone to an IMF program. And like I said,
are you serious? That you think that the politics of being,
it's just the politics.
So
the politics and then the timing
damaging. Is that what
it shouldn't be. Actually, it's the timing, probably the timing of going to the IMF and the sort of facility we're actually going for, which leads to the kinds of tax and the ego issues that we don't want to deal with. So otherwise, the gentleman is essentially communicating that, look, government is the biggest spender. Government is the one that drives a country to an iceberg, as we currently have. If the government is able to rein in on its borrowing and rein in on its expenditure, then even though the other parts of the economy, the real sector, are doing well, if we don't take care, the twin devils of the government's functions of excessive borrowing and excessive expenditure will swallow all in fact, will dwarf the gains made in the real sector. That's essentially what he's trying to say, which is why almost all the other rating agencies are saying, well, you are the one in the seat. You dictate. If you borrow so much from the domestic economy, what it means is that you drive away, you dwarf the portion of money available to the private sector, which means that it has consequence on economic productivity. And of course, what it obviously means is that government necessarily does not use the money profitably. So it's a pretty simple function, really. I'm not too sure that going to the fund, well, again, as I said, it depends on the time you go into the fund. Otherwise, there are a potpourri of fund programs that you can actually access, and we should have probably started long ago.
The last time was in 2014, right?
I think 2018. It ended in 2018, but there was an extension.
So 2015-ish?
2015, yeah.
Into 2018?
Yeah, they extended, I think, another year.
Another year, okay. So it's like it's almost midterm.
You know, the data, and Professor Bobkin has done this, clearly shows that anytime there are political transitions, or we have a major reform effort, after that we go to the IMF.
Oh, the data suggests that?
The data suggests that. So that's why, so it's clear.
But then frankly, they're not suggest that this is structural, not... Because if you've done 16 times in 50-something years of independence, and you're saying that it's time to major transitions...
Well, it's structural, and the structural nature of it is that the government is at the commanding height of the wastefulness. See, the point to be made is that the government drives economic activity, unfortunately, in this country. There's too much government involvement in our lives. And if the governments were using the funds profitably, we'd be better off. So the reasons why I started off by saying that the problems of our economy obviously have been the weak productivity of the private sector, coupled with high borrowing cost, and obviously then excessive waste. Who are the ones driving all of these, should I call them, activity? It's the government. The government is the largest spender. The government wants to have a conversation about taxation only when it realizes that the kitty is small. What is in the kitty is small. These conversations about the democratizing taxation, an equitable tax system, should have been had much longer than now. So that it doesn't become something like an SOS that, look, you are not paying a fair share of the tax. And even then, that in itself has to be questioned. This conversation about people are not paying tax should also lead us to the type of taxation system we want in the country. I mean, the former communist countries most of them decided to go towards flat tax. And I think it's helping them. It's more predictable. It's very easy to collect, rather than this very wishy-washy system we have, where we give almost $2.something billion in terms of tax credit, and we can never see the value addition to the economy, right? I mean, the peers we compare ourselves with, some of the taxes we pay in this country are quite high. Some of the port taxes are quite high. Some of the taxes we pay at our airports, aviation-related taxes, are much higher than our peers. So it looks to me that, yes, there's a conversation to be had about paying your fair share, but the person...
Let me ask you a question on taxes. Do you think the government's approach to taxes, in terms of things like the property tax, reveals a certain fear of taxing the rich? Because there's an assumption in Ghana that if you look at the growth of the construction sector, and then the sheer amount of development within the middle to upper class real estate, and the low levels of collection of property tax, a low-hanging fruit, using your words, could be property tax. But for the past 5 years, we haven't really seen any effort towards that. What is your view on that?
Well, I don't know whether to call it inertia or just deliberate inertia, basically. I don't see any issues around taxing the rich here at all. I mean, properties are the most visible assets to tax, really. I think the work that must be done, the hard work of doing proper valuations, is what is missing. And this is where maybe the Land Valuation Board must be made, or the Ministry of Lands and Forestry, Ministry of Lands, must somehow see the need to engage a lot of valuers in order to, and this can be done. I recall when we were leaving school, I read Land Economy, which has a division of valuation, by the way. I recall most of my mates were National Service were asked to go around and do some assessment of values of certain properties. We could have just continued from there. But then we You
did an economy at Tech, eh?
Yes, I did.
So you understand. But do you need I mean, frankly, okay, maybe I'll deal with that later, because this is not a discount of property tax. But isn't that an excuse that you haven't done valuation? You can look at how much people sell the prices. Go on the listings. If you go to the average website for these properties in cantonments, if somebody is selling a property for $540,000, why do you need land valuation to know that if I want to even do a property tax of 10%, the amount is 54?
Well, presumably before the property is sold, there's a valuation, and sometimes the valuation may be depressed. I mean, it depends. I mean,
at least you can start there. I mean, but why do you need to spend money to do a whole valuation of every property before you do property tax collection?
Well, you may not. You could do some sort of landscaping. I'm not saying every property must be valued per se, but there are bands and there are zones. A property that is this property here should command a much higher value than this similar property in my village, the Lobi Kumasi.
I see.
That's the reason why you do valuation.
Okay. Let me come to Dr. Kwachi before I take my next break. I have quite a number of messages. Doc, so I will be interested in reading your thesis on case studies on IMF programs. And so please share it with me when we are done, if it's still public knowledge. But let me just wrap up on the IMF question with a couple of things. So are you advising that the government should go for the program directly, or you're saying that there's nothing wrong with going for an IMF program, but it's their choice? I want to know your view on whether this is the time to go for the program or not. A definite statement on the IMF issue.
Well, Ben, sometimes the answer these questions it's not easy to answer yes or no. What I've said is that I want to understand the government itself. They should do a introspection of themselves and see what they want to do or what they do not want to do. Because I am saying that if they take some of the measures that we have suggested around this Zoom, meeting on the revenue side, on the expenditure side, I mean, they will be able to bring the budget, which is now, or fiscal policy, which is now the focus of the markets, to a level that will give confidence, the kind of confidence or credibility that we want to seek from the IMF, because the markets want to see whether you yourself, your policies are credible. And I'm saying that the government itself can do enough to demonstrate that. But if you are not prepared to do enough to demonstrate that, then of course you run to the IMF to seek that cover of credibility cover from the IMF. And then the investors will take it from there. So given what I know can be done on the revenue side and then on the expenditure side, I don't think that we should be going to the IMF. By the way, the statement that the Res Rep put up, and in the end saying that, the IMF is ready, to assist Ghana. They always assist us, they give us policy advice under the Article 4 consultations, I think annually, except that their advice there is not binding. But having worked at the IMF, I know that they would always want to engage with developing countries. That is part of their job. And they take satisfaction in coming to you to give you policy advice. And then also the fee, the charge, the financial charge, because the IMF funds are not free. At least there's some small financial charge. They also use it, they benefit from it, they need it. So when that approach you, I'm saying that sincerely they want to help us, but they also give you funding, which is a loan, and they benefit. How small it is, they still benefit from it. So I'm not surprised that the IMF is courting Ghana, but as I've said, unless the government is not prepared to take those very harsh measures. On the revenue side.
Let me read something to you for your comment. I know you've been on the Bank of Ghana board before. You've been on Monetary Policy Committee, so you know how these things work. But the president is quoted as having said that E-levy will provide more jobs and reduce dependency on debt. And I'm assuming that these are things he's being told to say because of whatever. And I don't know whether that may reflect some of the problem. Let me just read this story on citynewsroom.com, published last week. The government has reiterated the need for the introduction of the E-levy. The president tweeted on Wednesday, 27th January, that the E-levy will, among other things, reduce the country's dependence on foreign aid. The E-levy will provide the government with revenue to build more roads, provide more jobs and opportunities for the youth, and reduce our dependency on debt. His comments is part of efforts by government to sensitize the public on the need for the introduction of the E-levy, including a nationwide town hall which started on Koforidua on Thursday. The government says the feedback from the engagement will inform it on the implementation of the levy. Now, then it goes on to talk about the town hall meeting and stuff. I mean, based on everything I know about the E-levy and how much it will bring, why will the president tweet that the E-levy will reduce our dependency on foreign aid, provide us with revenue to build more roads, more jobs and opportunities for the youth? I mean, from all the calculations, this is, I mean, how much are you going to get from this? So is the E-levy not being oversold to him for him to make this serious tweet? This is just a week and a half ago. Doc, I mean, is this not part of the problem?
Yeah, Ben, can I come in?
Yes, please.
Yeah. You know, the E-levy, as we have said, is just about $1.1 billion. That's not a lot of money. I mean, how much roads can that build? Let alone the other programs which are also earmarked to be financed by the E-levy. And we are already talking about, a lot of earmarking of our revenue. We use it for, in other words, the District Assembly's Common Fund, a GET Fund, National Insurance, National Health Insurance, Road Fund, and all that. Mm-hmm. So this, by saying that you are going to earmark the E-levy for these other sectors, is another form of, revenue earmarking. And even we say that in economy, we say that money is fungible. I find it difficult to visualize that, the E-levy can be separated from the rest of government revenue and then targeted to, those sectors. Of course, they said there will be a system to monitor it. To me, the E-levy is not bringing enough money. It is multiple taxation, and all that. So, and there is a way to avoid that. I've listed a lot of areas, revenue measures that can be taken, and then they will rake in a lot more, much, much more than, we are expecting from the E-levy. Of course, it's expecting to be permanent. In other words, every year, and then he expects it maybe to increase also as electronic transactions increase. Maybe that's why he's making that point. But I think that it's too much to be saying that it will do all those things that he's talking about.
I see. So you think that you will not stick your neck out and say go to IMF or not? You are.
Myself. I think let me make myself clear before,
yes.
Because I have said that if we do our homework well, we don't need to go to the IMF. But if government is not prepared to do its homework, then we'll continuously or increasingly come under pressure from investors. And then the pressure may build up to the extent that because it will affect your sovereign rating, your bonds, your ability to borrow, it will affect your exchange rate and all that. So the pressure will mount to a point that maybe you cannot resist anymore going to the IMF. And we don't have to get there.
All right. Final question. Did you say that the IMF benefits if we go on an IMF program? I just wanted to be clear on that. How do they benefit from us going on a program with them?
Yes, I've worked with the IMF before, and I know that, the fee that they charge on their loans to, countries that borrow from them, it goes to support the administrative budget of the IMF. Okay. You may think that is, some countries take huge amount. If Mexico is borrowing, for instance, Mexico could get $10 billion, or even sometimes some countries 20. It depends on the size of your quota in the fund, because you also make a contribution to the fund that determines your quota. That is why smaller countries like Ghana, we don't normally get a lot from the IMF, because your quota in the fund is also small. Okay, so in fact, saying that we should go to the IMF, the last time we got 1 billion over 3 years. I'm sure that if we are going back, we won't get anything beyond 2 billion, because our quota, our ability to borrow, is determined by the size of our quota. Okay, by saying that the fund will benefit, of course, they want to go out and give advice, policy advice to countries. That is the work that they do. But I'm saying that the fee that they charge on their loans also helps them, their budget.
Because I thought their loans were zero interest rates.
No, please.
They are not.
It's not zero. No,
really?
No. There's at least.
Is that not how we call them concessionary loans?
Yeah, but concessionary, it's not like grants. They are not grants. If you go to the World Bank, the IDA, then that you can get, free money. Grants. But the IMF doesn't give grants. They will charge you a fee, administrative fee, something, which will come to maybe 1.something%. But you put 1.7% on somebody getting $20 billion. So I don't want to overstretch that point.
Okay.
But I have worked there, and I know that, when some of the big countries in Asia, exited from the IMF, the big countries that were borrowing huge amounts exited from the IMF, it affected the IMF's administrative budget. I was there. And that forced the IMF even to do some restructuring of the staff. They put out that.
They did their own fiscal restructuring.
Exactly. They said, if you want to take advantage, of some payment and leave the fund, and a lot of people took advantage of it, because the amounts involved were substantial, and they left the fund.
Wow.
Okay. Yes.
This is interesting. So even though you've worked with them as a consultant for 10 years, you will not outrightly say, Mr. Kenoforiata, pick up your phone and call Dr. Tuna Mama tomorrow morning. You need to think about your homegrown solutions, start exerting your own fiscal discipline, so you don't even get to a point where you are forced to go to them. Although some people think we've already reached that point. You think that we still have something to do to salvage the situation before we actually go cap in hand begging.
Yes, that's what I believe. And then we will have to take some very harsh measures, as I've said, which sometimes some of them may not be politically palatable. And that's why I'm not in government. So when you are speaking outside government and as an professional economist, you may be able to say things that maybe, because our own colleague, Dr. Baumia, is in government. He's an economist, but maybe because he's in government, the politics will affect his decisions. So looking at it from the outside, I can say that, if I were there, I would have taken these measures, I would have done this, I would have done that, both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. Because they are in government, they may not be prepared to take those measures because they think it may hurt them politically.
Because the likes of Ricketts will not give them space. Ricketts and co will be giving them stress on radio every morning, saying, you said we're incompetent. Now who is more incompetent? So because of that, they won't do what may be right for the economy.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate your candor and your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your insights on this. we'll leave it here. I'll come back in after the break because I know Ricketts is laughing because he knows exactly what he would do if the government goes to IMF. Whether that is in the interest of Ghana or interest of politics, we'll find out. Whether it's tit for tat he's doing.
Interest of Ghana.
We'll also deal with that. Later on, we'll also talk about fuel prices because there's also a couple of issues that have come up. Fuel prices have crossed the 7 cedi barrier. There are calls for the government to extend the suspension of the price stabilization and recovery levy, which was suspended for 3 months, but the suspension ended 31st January, and it's led to fuel prices crossing 7 easily. In fact, COPEC is predicting that fuel prices will reach 8 cedis a liter. 8 cedis a liter before mid-year if something drastic does not happen. We'll try and deal with that as well when we come back, plus your comments. This is The Big Issue, your Saturday news analysis program. I'm Bernard Avle, sitting in for a regular host. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Big Issue. It's your favorite weekend news analysis program. And my name is Bernard Avle. We have 2 issues today. The first one is whether or not Ghana should go for an IMF program. Guest in studio, Franklin Kujo of Imani, Kwekuri Ketegan, MP for Cape Coast South. We had earlier on Professor Lord Mensah, University of Ghana Business School, and Dr. John Kwachi. Now, let me summarize the positions I've heard so far. Professor Lord Mensah says we don't need to go to the IMF. We have to start doing what we have to do now. Dr. Kwachi doesn't seem to think we should go to the IMF yet, although he feels if we don't do certain things drastically, we'll be forced to go. So the 2 academics don't think we should go. Franklin thinks we should go because we have already reached decision point. Now, you haven't told me whether we should go or not. You are being a bit evasive, so I'll come to you to give me a clear position.
Yeah.
But let me read a few comments before I come to you. Good morning, Bernard. It's high time we as developing countries began to do things the proper way. The Bretton Woods institutions will never help us to develop. Suleiman Adamba, the Big Six Secretary Tamale. Now, says Bernard, can the government share the already existing 1% with the telcos? After all, they've already given up 0.25%. This is in reference to the telcos. Another one from Julius in Somania. Bernard, you remember the conditions IMF gave President Mahama? No recruitment in public sector, among others. He doesn't think it's a good idea to go. Maybe they will come and tell us to cancel free SHS, free TVET, etc., etc. Let's share the cost. 0.95 will not be bad. Reclassify church activities and tax them 30% and raise the threshold to between 200 and 500. Kukula Paz says, Bernard, the E-levy is just electronic pickpocketing by the government. I don't agree with it. So, Honorable Riketegan, I have a clear position from everybody on this panel on the IMF. I'm not sure I have your position.
Yeah, man. To give you a position, I just don't say go to IMF or not to go to IMF. To give you a position, I want us to just do a small analysis here.
Okay.
And I want to also narrow the analysis because if you say going to IMF, it involves, so many things. Mm-hmm. But let's just narrow it to the situation that we are in at the moment. Mm-hmm. 2022, we want to impose E-levy on our people versus going to the IMF.
Yeah.
Let's look at the cost-benefit analysis of doing so. Then we can come to a conclusion whether we should go to the IMF or not to go to the IMF. Mm-hmm. The E-levy, and we're talking about just 2022, the government's thinking is that E-levy is going to be charged every year. If you go to IMF, it's going to be a one-off, hopefully. Though we've been there 16 times. But if you just take 2022, how do we get ourselves out of 2022 even to get to 2023? The E-levy was originally going to be just a little over $1 billion. Now, the revision that we've been given 1.5 now will give us about 5.7 billion. So, E-levy for 2022, if it started in January, or if it has started in January, would have given us just a little under $1 billion. When you come to IMF, if we go on an IMF program and ask for money, we will probably get between 1 to 2 billion. So whatever we get from IMF this year will be more than what we will get from E-levy. That's one. On money side.
Based on the assumptions you've made, if they are correct.
Yes. Well,
yes, I agree. Based on your assumptions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Number 2, you will not get a policy advice on the E-levy. But you will get a policy advice on the when you go to the IMF. You will not get policy credibility from E-levy. You get a policy credibility from going to the IMF. The IMF will basically enhance your image,
externally.
Externally.
But probably damage you politically, domestically.
Well, it wouldn't, unless you made some utterances in the past about not going to the IMF, and now you are in a position where you have to eat, your whatever
humble pie.
Now you look at it and you just ask yourself, okay, our ratings are down. We've never been at the CAA1 before. How do we get ourselves out of there? E-levy is not going to get you out of there, but credibility from the IMF would probably get you out of there. E-levy is not going to give you the discipline we need, fiscal discipline that we need, because we've been taking all these monies, COVID or otherwise, and we are still in the same situation. So hopefully, going to the IMF will give you that. But the question becomes, we've been to the IMF 16 times, so what is different? And let me give you this analogy. It's like you are out of shape and you want to go to the gym. You don't have the motivation to go to the gym yourself, so you hire a gym instructor.
Okay.
The gym instructor puts you back to shape and then gives you all the things that you need to do for you to be able to continue. You come back from the gym after the 6 weeks or something, gym instructor, you start drinking your beer, eating the stuff that you... What do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to get bloated again, and then you sit down and look at yourself and say, I need to go to the gym again. You don't have the motivation to go to the gym yourself. If you have the motivation, because the gym instructor put in place or help you to put in place all the kind of motivation you need. The fiscal committee, the government itself set up a committee to deal with the exchange rate, and nothing happened. We are still in the same place that we are. Hopefully, this time round, when you call the gym instructor to come and put you back to shape, you will follow the things that they ask you to do so that you don't end up there again.
Wow.
For that reason, Ghana must go to IMF now. Otherwise, as you are still sitting in your couch and drinking beer, your situation is going to get worse. More work will be needed when you finally call the gym instructor. That is, if you don't call the doctor, you might end up not calling the instructor, but rather you need a doctor. So if we don't do the IMF now, we will never get ourselves out of this credibility situation. In fact, the credibility situation now is worse than when the NDC, when we were in office. Because we didn't have a triple, what is it called? Triple C plus, status in terms of a credit rating. We have no credibility out there. We cannot go to the market. And what is going to happen? Now, one important thing why we should go to the IMF. The IMF was originally designed, this is the original function of the IMF, to help you stabilize your exchange rate. This is the job of the IMF. Before all the other things, policy advice and credibility came in. So the money that you get from IMF is actually to help you deal with your exchange rate, which eventually becomes the bigger problem. Because if you are not able to pay your debt, at the moment, the only thing that is holding us, or that is making the rating agency hold on, that we are still credible in a way that we haven't defaulted. Maybe that's the word, not credible. We've not defaulted, is that they believe that we have enough reserves to basically pay for our debt.
At least in 2022.
Yes, and deal with exchange rate challenges that we may have.
Yes.
Why did we get that reserve? We got that reserve as a result of the last Eurobond of about 3.5 billion that we did. Now, that money is being spent on paying our debt and trying to, prop up our exchange rate. When that money dries out, E-levy cannot be a substitute. But IMF money can go into the central bank to prop up our reserves to keep us going. We need to be clever at this. Otherwise, in the end, we will get ourselves into a much deeper problem. Because if you are not getting you are not going to the international capital market, where are you going to get money from? You are going to now come home and crowd the market to borrow from the domestic market. Now, there's only limited money here. Part of the money you get, or some of the investors in your domestic market are actually foreign investors. In fact, our domestic loans, it's not only our foreign loans that are controlled by foreigners, but a big chunk of our domestic debt is also controlled by foreigners. The same decision they've taken out there that we can't come to the market, those here will also take decision that it's about time to go. Now, look at what has happened globally. As economies pick up, interest rate and stuff, Americans are going to stop quantitative. They haven't stopped already. Rates are likely to go up. So investing globally becomes attractive.
As compared to frontier markets where people invest when things are flat in the Western world.
When things were flat in the Western world. Now that the global market gets a little bit exciting, people have options. So when these people begin to leave your market...
So which means that even the analysis that we will not get enough money from the outside world is not just based on our fundamentals, it's also based on external development.
It's external development. We're going to look at both. So external development can hurt us even domestically by these guys pulling out of the market. And when they pull out, what happens? They take their money, they change it to dollars, they hurt your CD, and they leave the market. So if we are not careful and deal with this issue properly and stop being shy of going to the IMF because of things that we have said ourselves, we are going to be in serious trouble out of our own stubbornness.
That's interesting. So with all your example of the gym, you're saying go to IMF now.
Yes. And hopefully when you come out this time, you will adhere to the things that they have asked you to do.
Very interesting. So at least we have a position now.
Yes.
Two of the guests say go to IMF. One says don't go. One says I won't say you should go, but if you misbehave, you will go. So it's a bit like two and a half. All right. So do you want to add a quick one? Because I want to move to fuel prices as well. But Ricketts, thank you for that example. So I want to move to something else, which is related, right? So fuel prices to hit 8 cedis per litre soon. Adopt dual pricing method, COPEC to government. This story was published on the 5th of February. So that's, I think, today. Is today 5th or 6th? I'm even confused. Today is 5th. Okay. Now, the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana has asked the government to adopt measures aimed at cushioning Ghanaians against the astronomical increases in petroleum prices. COPEC is already predicting that the price per litre of the product will hit 8 cedis by March 2022. And mind you, we're in February. Executive Secretary of COPEC, Duncan Amoah, on Eyewitness News lamented that government is doing too little to bring down the prices of fuel and must immediately devise means to address the incessant increases. Quote, in real terms, fuel prices increasing these days happen to be one of the very things pushing the economy to the brink. The year began with fuel price around 6.6 cedis per litre. Unfortunately, we now have some OMCs selling at 7.50. It is our estimation that probably by the end of March, if international price trends continue to move as they are doing, we will be crossing the 8 cedi per litre mark. Then the writer gives a background. Prices of fuel have gone up at the pumps across the country because the price stabilization and energy recovery levy, which is a key component of the price build-up, has been restored by the NPA after it was suspended for 3 months. The levy was suspended last year as a means of reducing the burden on consumers. Already, COPEC has called for the withdrawal of the levy and has now urged the government to adopt what it calls the dual pricing module to stabilize fuel prices and the accompanying economic difficulties. Here's another quote from him. Our expectations as a chamber is that authorities should be looking for ways to bring down fuel prices. One could bring the dual pricing method, where anytime international market prices go up, they ease down on the taxes and again the full of that to the taxes. Because fuel prices going up on the world market is of greater benefit to Ghana than we are currently making it to be. And then it says, so as you can see, we have crossed the 7 cedi mark. It's quite certain by second window of February, which will commence in about 12 days, prices will go up again. So let me play a couple of quick inserts for viewers, and then I'll come in studio to discuss this. Fuel prices fast approaching the 8 cedi per litre mark. What can be done to reduce that?
This is not the first time that fuel prices have gone up this year. The last time it happened, it incurred the wrath of commercial drivers across the country who embarked on a protest demanding a reduction in the price of fuel. Although most of the drivers took part in the protest, it failed to yield the desired results. The price of fuel went up again on Tuesday, and once again, public transport drivers are unhappy about the developments. The NPA explains that the current increment is as a result of the reintroduction of the price stabilization and recovery levy. The levy was suspended last year as part of efforts to cushion consumers from the constant rise in the price of fuel products in the country. However, leadership of the GPRTU says this increment is not in the interest of their members.
The fares that we charge are the same, and yet we are buying more fuel. And so it's affecting us. Sometimes at the close of the day, when you take out the cost of fuel from your sales, you even can't get your daily sales. And if you cannot get your daily sales, and so how do you get job money to your house? So it's really affecting us. But because the government has pleaded with us to remain calm until the negotiations are completed, there's nothing we can do.
Some of the drivers also accused the government of being insensitive to their plight.
First, if I buy 100 cedis, I can take and work and close. By now, if I buy 100 cedis, unless 200 cedis. So, but if you talk, it will not go and end anywhere. So we just keep quiet. The GPRTU, our bosses, you see, they should have to talk about it. But when we talk, it doesn't end anywhere. So we don't know how to do now. And GPRTU boss too, they don't mind us because if something, they are our boss. Our boss, them they here, and some day to regional, national. Though they are big men. You see, if they don't talk, we don't know what to say.
Now, it's affecting a lot. If we are talking, the government didn't listen us. So, me, Stephen, I didn't beg the government. If you like, if you take the diesel fuel to 100 Ghana, we buy it. Only God will listen to the drivers. But now, I want to talk to our GPRTU. Say this, we're begging him to try to find some small money to our fare. Because now, if you work out, the money all buy for diesel, we didn't get anything. Police too, they worry us. So they beg the GPRTU executive to come in, at least. If we find some small money on it, then we too will be appreciated.
The drivers are calling on the government and the GPRTU to urgently reduce the fuel prices. Reporting for Citi News, my name is Nashika Caesar.
The price stabilization and recovery levy was initially taken off the price build-up of fuel on the 1st of November 2021 for 2 months, but was later extended till the end of January 2022. The move was to absorb some of the shock on consumers from the frequent increases in prices on the international market. But with this latest announcement from the National Petroleum Authority, fuel prices at the pumps are expected to go up from the 1st of February. This will mean prices are likely to go up by 16 pesos per litre on petrol, 14 pesos per litre on diesel, and 14 pesos per kilogram on LPG. Head of pricing at the NPA, Abbas Ibrahim Tasunti, has been speaking on the development.
The price stabilization and recovery levy, as you are aware, it was removed for a 2-month period from the 1st of November 2021 to the 31st of December 2021. A further extension of this removal was done for the month of January. And we communicated this to the industry that it will last for another 1 month, which ends on 31st January 2022. So as we speak, the levies on petrol, diesel, and LPG have been off for 3 months, which expires today, 31st. So per our letter, it is to be restored effective 1st February 2022.
The purpose of the Price Stabilization and Recovery Levy is to stabilize prices for consumers and pay for the subsidies on premix fuel and residual fuel oil. Mr. Tasonti stated that continuing with the suspension of the levy would hamper the provision of the latter.
If we remove it forever, it means they will not have money to pay, and then we'll have to look elsewhere. You remember one of the main reasons why price regulation came into being was because of the non-payment of subsidies that are accrued on fuel products, and therefore it threatened the supply of these products. And therefore, we have to make sure that the levy, whilst we use it to pay the subsidies, it can also be used to stabilize. So for the 3-month period that it has been taken off, nothing has gone into the account. And we've been using what the kind of the backlog or the balance in the account over this period to pay for these subsidies. As we speak, the account is dry. So if we remove it forever or we continue zeroing the levy, it means we will not have money. And then now the subsidy or the supply, the continuous supply of premix fuel and residual fuel oil will be threatened, which we don't want that to happen. So unfortunately, for the consumer, it has to come back. We've enjoyed the removal for 3 months, but this is the time to bring it back so that we don't have an issue of financial challenges for the suppliers of these products.
So that was Abbas Tasunti from the MPA ending that report from the news desk. This is still the big issue, your favorite weekend news analysis program. We're now talking fuel prices, and the panel has expanded. We started with Lord Mensah and Dr. Kwachi. They're left now. I have in studio now Isaac Esau. He's the Deputy General Secretary in charge of Admin GPRTU. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll still have Franklin Kujo and Kwekuri Ketegan in studio. Thank you for staying. I'll start with a Chamber of Petroleum Consumers. Duncan Amo has joined us. It was his statement I read earlier. I want him to clarify a few points for us. He is the Executive Secretary of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, COPEC. Duncan, thank you for joining us on part 2 of the big issue. You are saying that where fuel prices have gotten to, by end of March, they could hit 8 cedis per litre. What is the basis of that very grim prognosis?
Bernard, good morning, and good morning to your guest in studio. In fact, I followed your discussion since big issues began this morning. You're doing a great deal of service to Madagascar. Bernard, we're already at 7 cedi 45, 7 cedi 50, some at 7 cedi 36. We've crossed the 7. We are just a few pesos shy of 8. Mind you, with the current window, which happens to be the one that started from the 1st and should end on the 14th of the month. This is where crude prices probably are getting crazy. And you see crude now moving from the 89, 90, as we speak, is around 93, and it's still going. The threat of Ukraine attacking, Russia attacking Ukraine is putting a lot of pressure on the European market because of the uncertainty. And so they will keep buying. COVID has also slowed down, and global demand is likely to surge by a minimum 8% this year per outlook. Bernard, mind you, at the peak of COVID, around 2020, between March and June, crude prices, and for that matter, fuel prices, petrol, diesel, slumped. In fact, for petrol, diesel, we saw a dip from $540 per metric to around $180 a metric. Now that gets OPEC worried. And OPEC says, okay, we're going to slow down or cut back on production numbers. And so for the consumption globally of 100 million barrels daily, OPEC was able to do a slowing down of as much as 10 million barrels, although demand had also slumped to around 75 million per stream day. As we speak, the countries that had a lot of easing or lockdowns as far as COVID-19 is concerned, they are all back to productivity. India, China are back to consuming the huge numbers. Yet, the 10 million barrels that OPEC decelerated on, per their last meeting, they agreed they were only going to be able to come back 400,000. Even as at the end of January, the report is that they were able to just increase by 222,000 barrels. It gives you a certain shortfall of over 9 million barrels daily. So there's pressure on the supply side because OPEC is not flooding the market anymore. Demand is also increasing. Uncertainty between Ukraine and Russia is also heightening the fears across the European bloc. So you can imagine what outlook for 2022 looks like. Bernard, it doesn't look as though prices are going to drop this year as we have seen in over the past 14 years, where mostly in January, it goes up a bit the first window. By the second window, it slowed down. In February, it's going down. It goes down all the way to March. If you check prices, we have crossed 93 and they're still growing. So, give or take, the next window, which commences somewhere 16th of February, today is 5th, if I'm right.
Yes.
So, in 11 days, you are going to see 10, 20, 30 pesos increase further because international market prices is still going up. Again, the city, which we have complained about variously, it's also not helping the fuel importers markets. They have to resort to what you call the forward FX calculation. If I'm bringing in fuel today and need to pay my supplier in, say, 120 days, and the thinking is that I need $10 million to pay a supplier. If the CD was to $1, and the thinking is that by the time I'm done selling and I need to pay the supplier, it could be a CD 0.2 or one CD 20 to $1. What it means is that I need to factor that 0.2, which is about 200,000 extra or 2 million extra, into my pricing today. So we have suggested the Bank of Ghana take a second look at the way we auction dollars on the open market. When the fuel importers would have a certain stringent need. So if Bank of Ghana decided to take a second look at how they auction dollars and channel some to the petroleum importers, then you could be taking care of that aspect of our pricing. Unfortunately, that is not being done. And so the CD, as far as some of the fuel importers today are quoting, they are quoting 6.7. Some others are doing almost 6.8 to $1. Then that factors into pricing at the BDC level. So before the OMCs would even buy from BDCs, prices would have gone up coupled with international market prices. And eventually, the OMCs would have to reflect these numbers at the pump. So, give up. If you do 21st West end of February, and March comes also with 10, 20 pesos, 10, 20, the 8 CD is more than a reality by close of March.
Duncan, thank you. I'll come back to you later on your proposed dual pricing method. Let me come to Mr. Esau. GPRTU, are you lacing your boots for a transport fare increment? Because I'm sure you also watch the price. Duncan is saying now it's 7.36, 7.45, 7.5 per liter, both petrol and diesel. What is the mood within the GPRTU about this, and what does this mean for fuel, for transport fares?
Yeah, thank you very much. You're all aware when we decided to make a sit-down strike somewhere early December last year. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, we were able to sit down with the ministry. And the assurance was that fuel price will be coming down. At the time, unfortunately, it came down a bit. But unfortunately, it has started coming up again. So the coalition of private transport organizations met, that is, I think Friday. Yeah.
Just this Friday?
Just this Friday. Yeah, with the aim of coming together to maybe
to start your things again.
But this time around, I think fortunately the ministry has shown concern, and I think it has what is called invited the leadership. So God willing, Monday we may meet.
You are going for a meeting on Monday with the ministry?
With the ministry, yes, sir.
And have you decided what you will tell the minister when you meet him on Monday?
Yeah, yes, as for that.
You know what you say?
You know what we are going to say.
You are holding your stone behind your back?
Yes, please.
Are you all on the same page? Because I know there are different transport groups.
Yes,
are all the transport unions on the same page?
Yeah, we are on the same page. We are on the same page. You know, as much as we are safeguarding our industry, we have to also think about Ghanaians. See, so we know, and I think from time past, this fuel thing, the transport sector is not giving the what is called this thing to decide for itself. Yeah, we are always, excuse me to use the word, coerced, irrespective of which government is in power. Yes, they will coerce you to at least come to a certain level, and that is exactly what we have been experiencing.
So can you give me a hint of the position when you met on Friday? What are the transport unions telling each other when you met on Friday?
Okay, when we met on Friday, at least you could see that we made some of our members who have that expertise in the sector to make some survey, bucket surveys. So they went for the service. The first meeting was to get the people on ground to do the survey. So this time around, when we meet the ministry, we know what we are going to say. So therefore, they went and they came back to report to us on Friday. So we are ready to.
So you are going to face the ministry?
Yes, please.
You are going to ask for an increase in transport fares, aren't you?
Yes,
you will.
Yes, we will.
Do you have a percentage in your mind?
Yes, at least we have a percentage in our mind.
Can you give me a hint?
Yeah, at least we are saying that maximum 30%, minimum 25%.
So you've already given yourself a band?
Yes.
25 to 30% increase.
Money.
I hold your leg. So from your calculations from the field, you will ask for between 25 and 30% increase.
E-levy.
Yeah. Yes, please.
You feel how important is fuel to your operations? Because you people talk about spare parts, you talk about
it isn't fuel. You know, when immediately fuel goes up, it affects all the other components and factors that make up the running of this transportation. So therefore, you know, when you go to Abosokai, you have no what to say about how much the person sells his goods. It is only the transport sector who are told to come to these terms, say 10%, 15%, 20%, not taking into consideration what the other, what is called factors, what is called or inputs, what is called channel into the system.
When was the last time you increased fares?
That was June 2021.
June 2021?
Yes.
What percentage did you increase by?
20%. We did about 20% there. We came to 15%, but eventually we were given 13%.
So June 2021?
Yes.
So you are going to tell government on Monday that you want between 25 and 30 increase?
Yes. You know, because of the COVID, at a certain point in time, they said they were going to what is called cushion us with the suspension of payment of some income tax for some quarters.
Vehicle income
tax. You know, but because of the upward adjustment of fuel, that cushion, eroded everything. So we couldn't feel it. You know, so in fact, if you are a transporter, you understand the kind of situation we are in now. Yes, when the driver comes, maybe you say he has at least pocketed some of your money. No, it is the fuel.
So 25 to 30% is what you will say on Monday?
Yes, that's at least when they give us 25, I think it will
be good.
It will be good, yes.
We'll take a break. When I come back, I'll ask my other guests in studio what they make of what is happening with the economy. It even appears the fuel prices are more serious than the E-levy. I also know that Imani's position generally has been anti-subsidy, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe you want to explain. I remember World Bank days, Kofi Chikata times, there was a whole discussion about why we should keep paying these inefficient subsidies. Maybe you can help me with that when we come back as well. I see you're also making some notes in Parliament. So we'll come back to that. This is the big issues, the Saturday news analysis program. Duncan is still on the Zoom. He will also tell us what the double pricing model is and how that can affect things. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the big issue. Today we've discussed whether we should go back to IMF or not. Now we're talking about fuel prices. Duncan Amma of COPEC is suggesting, and it's actually giving us some numbers, that by the next pricing window, we'll be inching towards 8 cedis per litre for both petrol and diesel. And as a consequence, Mr. Esau, who is Isaac Esau from GPRTU, thinks they deserve at least 25% upward adjustment of transport fares. Let me come to Cape Coast South. Your constituents are listening. Yeah. We've discussed E-levy and all the inconvenience there, the whole economy. Now fuel prices are also going up.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your view on what's going on?
Ben, we need to understand a few things. And I think the ministry and the government also need to understand exactly what is going on. I don't think they've got the picture very well. Before 2011, Ghana was not producing oil. Okay, so in whatever we have as a methodology for working out the pump price was based on some subsidies being paid to cushion the consumer. And that is by paying the suppliers of fuel, some sort, whatever price they come up with a price. We don't pass the full price on to the consumer. Government basically takes that bit. Now, that's what you do, and you ask the gentleman to tell us about this dual pricing, method thing. But in the past, what government used to do is that when fuel prices are going up, in addition to the subsidies, they may remove certain taxes. These are done temporarily while the prices, and the price of crude is going up. Because let me get a bit mathematical here and make it simple. The price build-up or the methodology for calculating the fuel price is a linear calculation with parameters like crude oil and all that in there to arrive at the price. So as mathematicians will say, in a linear curve, all these parameters are directly proportional to what you come up with. So if crude prices are going up, then your pump price will also go up because it's one of the parameters in there, or the key one. The taxes are basically they are percentages of some of these parameters that we are talking about. So when you remove them, then you basically reduce the price, because government I would say had some control in the way the prices are paid at the pump. And government control is in the taxes.
Okay.
So if they remove it or they put it back, depending on how things are going, and then with a subsidy. Now, the world has changed for Ghana. Ghana has now become an oil-producing nation.
Okay.
We've joined the ranks of oil-producing nation, which means that whatever is going on in the world of oil or crude, we are also benefiting, because we are a net exporter of oil. Before 2010, we are a net importer of oil. Now, what is happening at the moment? Where are we at the moment? Oil price is about 93 and all. Why is it at 93? Those are the things I said. Government is probably not looking at it. When we are doing a budget, we actually estimate what we think the crude price will be throughout the year. It is upon that
you make your assumptions for
revenue for your expenditure. Okay? This in 2022 budget, we have it in it as crude oil being around $65
per barrel.
Today, it's around 90, and it's going to go up. Why is it going to go up? And the gentleman mentioned a few things. One of them is the geopolitics that is going on at the moment single out Ukraine
and all that. So you expect the price to keep going up?
To keep going up until this tension actually comes down or,
and will that ignore to our benefit or hurt us if it keeps going up?
Well, it will do both. That is what I'm saying, that the world has changed. The world of before 2011, this will hurt us.
But
and
now,
the government will have to absorb it.
Yeah.
But now we are also benefiting as an oil producing nation. Now you come to the second issue, why the oil prices gone up and it's still going up. It's to do with the supply chain disruptions that happened during the COVID era, and it's still happening. It's correcting itself, but slowly. The third thing is to do with OPEC controlling of supply that the gentleman also mentioned. This all feed into the supply chain stuff. Now, the other thing is to do with demand. As I said earlier on, the world economy is recovering out of the pandemic. That means that demand for oil, which is the main ingredient for development, is also going to go up. Now, when you have demand going up and supply is not there,
matching up,
then you're going to have
higher price
going up. The other thing is to do with exchange rate. When our city keeps depreciating, then it's going to affect, obviously, all this. So it tells you that in the medium term, and that is the whole of 2022, oil prices will be going up and not down. The prediction is that we may hit 100 at various stages, which means that the breaking the 8 you are talking about could even be breaking the 9.
But the question that we need to address is, will that be a net benefit to us or not?
Yeah, so that's where I'm coming, where it's a net benefit. Okay, as I said, we put $65 in the budget, or about 64 something in the budget, which means that we have underestimated our revenue from the oil side. Okay, so the windfall that we are going to get is not in the budget. When you come to the other side, the costs that is happening as a result of the oil prices going up is also not in our budget.
Because there's a relation between the crude price and how much we pay for finished product, although there are other factors there.
What is happening on both sides are contingencies. So
the question is, do we import more finished product than we produce crude? And then when you do that netting, then you know whether the price will be better for us. Or
we are a net exporter, so you can look at it from separate standpoint.
But see, hold on, we are net exporter, but not everything that we export belongs to us. Because if are you saying we're net exporter on the basis of how much Ghana gets? Because if you produce 165 barrels per day, not all of that comes to you, because the guy who does the drilling takes some.
What I'm trying to say
is we're a net exporter. Is the net exporter on the basis of total production or the net ownership?
But being a net exporter, whether some of the money is going elsewhere or not, you are actually making a windfall as a result of the money.
So, but you should use the amount of, because we're talking about revenue versus expenditure. So the money. So if you produce 100 million barrels and 60% belongs to somebody else, you can only use 40 million as your revenue.
Exactly.
And I'm saying that when you use that 40, are you still a net exporter?
Absolutely.
Still?
Yes, because look at it this way. If you look in the budget, okay, last year, I think we did 55 million. Okay, the money that is due us, if you use that to do a calculation of if we should do the same 55 million, because nothing else has changed, we're probably going to produce the same amount. If you do that 55 million barrels, the money that we get as a country, after you have stripped off all the others going to others, will give us a 320 million US dollars windfall coming to Ghana.
On the revenue side.
On the revenue side. So let's just even leave out whether we are net exporter or netting, but we are going to get a windfall of 320 million, a money that we have not anticipated. You are also going to get a cost. I don't have the figure for how much cost that will cost government. But it's about time that the model that we used in pricing fuel should also have a windfall built in. So that when these things happen, you will use the windfall to cushion the
price. So you can remove the tax and say, because I'm getting 320 million from the windfall, some of the taxes I've put in there for government benefit can go away. Is that what he's referring to as the double pricing?
No, you don't. What I'm saying is that in the past, you'll use the tax. But this time around, you don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So if you're getting a 320 windfall, you could say that then there are some taxes that you've put on the final cost of export that you can remove because you are getting unanticipated 320 million. So you don't need that tax on top of the price build-up again.
Well, if you go to the taxes, we are making the same point, but in a different way. If you look at the taxes themselves, you cannot take and bring back taxes as and when you wish, because you have built the taxes into your budget.
I see.
So if today I say the price is, what is happening on the price side of the fuel is an unanticipated cost. So you cannot use a structured revenue to deal with it.
I see.
So leave the taxes in there. But the windfall, which is also an unanticipated benefit, should be the one fighting the unanticipated cost.
Good.
So if you build that into the build-up, if you are making 320 million windfall, which is not in your budget, because your budget says your price is going to be 65. That's what you've calculated the oil receipt on. But now you are going to get a 320 million. That 320 million should be used to cushion the price if you built it in your formula.
How do you do that?
And as I'm saying, it's a linear.
So you can use it to cushion the X pump for finished product.
Absolutely.
Interesting analysis.
So that you wouldn't, the prices.
So would that be a subsidy or how would it work? Let me I get your point though. Frankly, his point is that you are getting 320 million if the price trends continue on the revenue side. We haven't really calculated how much it will cost us in terms of finished product, because as the price per barrel rises, finished product cost also goes up in a way because it's related. Even assuming it reduces that by even 50, you still have some windfall there. He's saying use that to cushion the end user.
And let me.
I wanted your comment on that.
Yeah, let me. Subsidy. It's not money coming from your budget.
Which subsidy?
You are talking whether is it a subsidy?
Yes.
It's of course subsidy because you are using it to cushion oil prices.
That's if you decide to do that.
That if you decide to do that. But it's a subsidy that is not coming from your budget. In a sense that money is not a money you have basically planned to use.
Yes.
It's money that is coming. The same way as the cost that is coming to your budget is not a planned cost. The revenue that is also coming is not a planned revenue.
I see.
So those things can be dealt with outside your budget to get a price that is obviously
better,
comfortable.
So frankly, I think his point is clear. So I just want to find what do you make of where we are with this?
I totally understand what he's saying. I mean, clearly there's a netting off, so that people become he's urging that once you did not anticipate this, on the cost side, yes, there's some liability, but at the same time, on the windfall side. There's some amount that came in that you need to net off. So I understand that. In a liberalized economy, so the ones we pretend to have, clearly these things definitely have some cascading impact. Once you do not necessarily have control over some of the issues that lead to the increase in prices, the best you can actually do is to look at your domestic cost buildup. I mean, what are the factors that go into your pricing of finished products? At the end of the day, these things vary from one country to the other, right? And that's why I think we need to make some serious, and I think this is a conversation that has been going on forever, really. I mean, the tax buildup, some of the items that have become a bit nebulous, we still do not understand why. Okay, we state some of the stabilization. What was
price stabilization recovery levy is quite small. It was suspended for 3 months, and then the suspension ended.
Right.
But I think the main one is the special petroleum tax.
Exactly.
Because the special petroleum tax was introduced by these guys, and it was introduced as a ad valorem, I believe. Right?
It wasn't specific.
And then at the time, MPP criticized it.
Right.
And then they first initially reduced it from 17. And it was introduced because it was said that at the time that it was introduced, I think Seteko was in office.
Yeah.
The price we were expecting to get on the world market So the $55 example uses, we're getting like 30.
Yeah.
So we're going to lose out on how much we get from petroleum exports.
Sure, but a lot has changed.
Good. Now that you are getting a windfall, you can adjust SPT or even remove it. So that tax is being paid whilst you are still getting a windfall. So like a double benefit.
Yeah. And at this juncture, I think that's when we need to interrogate exactly whether government should do this now.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be now that they need extra money to do other things.
Yeah.
But we certainly cannot stomach a 25% to 30% increase. And this is where government...
From these guys?
No, we really cannot. But you see, we can also fault them. As you're saying, their inputs actually dictate, in addition to the global trends, dictate whatever pricing they are asking for. Otherwise, we are just going to postpone our funeral. If we got 10 or 15%, along the way, it will still increase. So can we do something about the build-up? If this special tax can be halved, for instance, then we may have to do our own calculations and say that, okay, then we can stomach maybe a 15% increase from the transporters. Otherwise, everything is headed north, and I really do not want to be in the shoes of the finance ministry.
Okay, let me come to Duncan quickly on this. So Duncan, you said something about the double pricing. What do you think realistically the government should do based on the analysis that Ricketts has given, that we may be getting a windfall of 300? He hasn't done a calculation for how much it will cost us on the import side. But what do you think government should be doing at this stage to cushion Ghanaians?
Bernard, thank you once again. Indeed, Ricketts has demonstrated a lot of knowledge in the subject matter, and I agree with what Franklin also indicated. Dual pricing is basically what Ricketts sought to explain.
Okay.
I'm making a windfall here, and my windfall is unanticipated, is unbudgeted. I am also having a lot of drag as far as my pump prices locally is concerned. And then one of the key things governments do forget is that when fuel prices are allowed to escalate the way we have at the Ghanaian pumps, the government of the day, at the end of the day, pays even more. Because your contractual costs would all go up. Every single department, ministry, and agency would need more. So when I listened to this morning between the economic discussions, where some monies that would need to be sent to other departments and agencies, we've moved from 16 or 15 billion last year to about 26 billion this year. The fuel factor will be playing a very key role. Those that you probably would have to give 100 gallons to every week or every month. If 100 gallons for you just a month ago was 50 cedis or 500, the same 100 gallons today could be 700 cedis. And government is probably the biggest consumer. And so when we talk of dual pricing, you make a windfall, ensure that part of that windfall, not everything entirely, you can have two things to do with it. You either give it directly to the fuel importation group or those importing fuel. And also because fuel prices are incremental. If I am building from 7.5 cedis and I have to add 10 pesos, I go to 7.6, Bernard, right? If I am building from, let's say, 6.2, and I still need to add 10 pesos, I'll go to 6.3. I cannot jump from 6.2 to 7.6 because of a 10 peso increment. So we have said there are times you would need to make certain interventions to stay prices. Now, once you stay those prices, if you had stayed less than the price we were before the recent increases in February, most of the pumps were trading around 6.8, right? And then because of the stabilization and recovery levy, they went up to 7, and then eventually world market prices also take them to 7.3, 7.5. If we had decided that While world market is also going up, but we've also made a windfall because we projected 65, 66. We are almost at 95. That windfall, the BDCs, how much are you importing monthly? 400 million liters. How much would that cost us if we put in $10 million, say? Okay, if you put in 10 million, then we would not increase at the BDC point for the OMC to even increase at the pumps. So if you stay prices, that 30 pesewa is gone for that window, Bernard. The next window, if it has to go up 10 pesewas, it will now be starting from the 6.8, 6.9, 7.0. So the net impact you would have on the economy would have at least been a bit reduced. But unfortunately, we are not managing fuel prices. We sent a whole position memo to the finance ministry before the 2022 budget was read. Mathematical computations have been done. Bernard, I will submit everything to you. That indicates if international market prices should surge by, let's say, $5, what you could do to the pump prices, don't go and reduce the taxes if you so wish not to. But instead of allowing the BDCs to factor that international market price to the OMCs, you stay that at the BDC position. Because you have a bit of an inflow and you are not even reducing taxes. And so I've been saying this. If the intention is to stabilize or manage fuel prices for Ghanaians, the solutions exist. If we also want to we don't want to stay. The free market should lead us to where it will lead us, Bernard. Then, naturally, prices would simply keep going up and we would sit and pretend, oh, we can't do anything about it. But truthfully, Ricketts is demonstrating something that we have suggested over the period. Franklin agrees. Don't go and take money from the budget, from government chairs, government funds. If that's able to forgive me for the bit in my. If you are able to get 320, our estimate for 2021 was way in excess of the 320 that Ricketts is putting out there. But let's say you did 300 and decided, okay, I can let you guys have 160 million of this, whilst I use the remaining windfall of 160 to also do other developmental projects. What it means is that government will be stabilizing its own economy. Take the inflationary basket. Very soon, the Ghana Statistical Service will come out with inflation computation. Petrol prices play the most significant role. UTAP is today asking government for enhanced, conditions of services. It's simply because things are tough. If you're a lecturer earning less than $1,000 and your fuel cost alone within a month will take about 30-40% of that income, Bernard, it means that you will go back to the employer and ask for more money. So instead of waiting for our labor force, the GPRTU to also come to us and say we are increasing transport fares, Bernard, if we had been a bit proactive, subventing for 10 million here, 5 million here, 10 million here, prices could have stayed as we speak.
So fair enough. So I think you've explained this very well. You're saying that you are not saying spend all the 100% of your windfall on cushioning, but you can even share it 50-50, and you can share it through the price build-up mechanism through the BDCs. So at least for once, we all seem to agree. Let me just come to Mr. Esau. Do you agree with this analysis that if world prices are going where they are going, they should be able to use some of that money to cushion everybody in the value chain so that you don't need to increase your price by that much?
Yeah, prior to us doing the sit-down strike, I think when we met government, that was exactly what we were saying, that some of these taxes must be removed in the petroleum price build-up. Some of the taxes must be, especially some specific taxes, because Mr. Duncan himself came to school us on the price build-up. So it was almost about 16 or 18 taxes. On the petroleum price build-up, 18 taxes. But when we saw the price stabilization and all those things, we were made to know that even that thing has at least its usefulness, because already. The government came out to say that they are able to pay some of these debts. So therefore, I think
so. Monday, you are going with a lot of ammunition.
Yes,
you are going with pie charts and things.
Yes, you know, we didn't want to increase first, because even the more you increase first, people.
But you are going with data.
Yes, if you are going with data, you know, if two people are to travel from my village to Accra,
yes,
because of the cost of this transportation, they will decide for one to come,
and then you know have
they will pay for one to come.
Thank you. So to end, we just a summary, Ricky. So in the first topic on IMF, we were split. Those of you here say we should go. Those on Zoom didn't think so. But on the issue of what government should do to help Ghanaians, it seems everybody has agreed that government has to do something drastic. My question to you is final. E-levy is coming back. We are told they are redoing the 1.75 and they are going to 1.5. Are you guys going to oppose it still? And this one, just 1 minute. We have run out of time.
The only way the E-levy can pass is, sadly, when they're able to marshal 138 to pass it.
Really? So you're 137 there?
Absolutely not.
Never?
Then DC will not participate in that.
Even if it's a secret ballot, not one NDC MP will agree?
I am quite sure.
All of them?
No one will dare to go against basically the collective decision of the
So even if E-levy is 0.75%,
no E-levy.
No E-levy.
Because for me personally, they don't need it. And I've demonstrated to you here where they can get the money. If they deal with tax exemption issue, which is about 3 billion, if they deal with the 20% cut after taking out all the rigidities, E-levy is not needed.
So E-levy, you vote against. If they have
to go to IMF, as I've done here, E-levy versus IMF, there's no policy. There's no policy credibility.
So your vote is.
There's no policy credibility for E-levy.
I see. So that's your point. And Franklin, final thoughts. This is a tough time for the country, right?
Obviously it is, and specifically on E-levy, I think I do not agree with the government when they say they want to use a portion to create jobs. Because going by the history of government job creation, these are virtually scams. I mean, they do not add value to the economy. And so it's very important, and I do not like my government to be creating these jobs. It's better you give the reprieve to the private sector to do that, so they can reduce the E-levy to 1%.
I see. So we'll leave it here. My guests on the big issue have been Franklin Kujo, who is the executive director of Imani. His position is clear. Go to IMF, but no E-levy. Help cushion petroleum users. I've also had Kweku Reketegan, MP for Cape Coast South. Go to IMF, he says, no E-levy, cushion Ghanaians. We had on Zoom Professor Lord Mensah, who says you don't need to go to IMF. We also had Dr. John Kwachi, who says he's not sure if IMF is where we should go at this point. In studio, Isaac Esau, Deputy General Secretary in charge of Admin GPRTU, he says they are meeting government on Monday. They want at least 25% increase in transport fares. Duncan Amoah says government can share the windfall, so we are all happy. Hope you've learned something from today's edition of The Big Issue. My name is Bernard Avle. Stay with us on Citi FM and on Citi TV as our other programs come up. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.